The average down payment for an apartment in New York City is 20% of the purchase price. While it's possible to put down 10% or less on many condos in the city, most co-op apartments have stricter financial requirements, which require a minimum of 20% down. Condo buildings in New York City often have minimum financing requirements as well. How much cash you need to buy an apartment in New York City is actually slightly more than your down payment due to buyer closing costs. To estimate your buyer closing costs in New York City, visit Hauseit's interactive closing cost calculator for buyers. If a condo building in New York City does not have a minimum down payment requirement, how much your down payment is will depend on what loan to value your bank is willing to lend to you at. 10% down is usually the lowest down payment for a condo in New York City, although, in rare instances, it is possible to see as little as 5% down. Just because a building or bank will permit 10% down does not mean that the seller will have to agree to it. For obvious reasons, sellers are more attracted to all cash and/or non-contingent offers, or offers with a higher down payment, because these deals have a higher certainty of actually going through. If you're putting down 5 to 10% and have a mortgage contingency, a seller will only agree to do a deal with you as a last resort if there are no other offers. Furthermore, a seller may demand a higher sale price as compensation for the increased risk of selling to someone with shakier financing and deal terms. If you're buying a co-op apartment, the amount of your down payment is a key measure of your financial qualifications, which will be reviewed as part of the co-op board application process. How do down payments work? It's customary in New York City for buyers to put down a 10% earnest money deposit upon signing a purchase contract. The deposit is held in an escrow account maintained by the seller's attorney. If you're putting down 20%, this means that you'd put down the remaining 10% balance at closing. If you have a mortgage contingency, this clause in the contract allows you to back out of a deal and recoup your contract deposit under certain conditions. While the amount of the contract deposit is technically negotiable, it's extremely rare for a seller to accept anything less than the customary 10%. How much money do I need to buy a condo in New York City? You need approximately 10 to 20% of the purchase price for a down payment, 2 to 6% of the purchase price for closing costs, and approximately 6 months' worth of housing expenses and post-closing assets to buy a condo in New York City. This means you need to have approximately 22% to 26% of the purchase price saved up in cash when buying a condo. Condo buyer closing costs can be as high as 6% for new construction and as low as 2% for an all-cash deal. The average condo closing cost bill for a buyer in New York City who is financing is 4%. How much money do I need to buy a co-op in New York City? You need approximately 20% down, closing cost of 1% to 2%, and post-closing liquidity of 1 to 2 years' worth of housing expenses in order to buy a co-op apartment in New York City. Fortunately, buyer closing costs in New York City are lower for co-ops compared to condos and houses. Co-ops are actually a great option for buyers in New York City, despite their sublet restrictions and the onerous board application process. This is because co-op apartments are 10% to 40% less expensive compared to condos.